Thanks everybody for jumping on here. We'll give it a minute before we really jump into this. All right, good day everybody and welcome. Whether you're joining us from the hop field, the brewery, maybe the tap room, office, maybe your couch, or somewhere in between, we're really grateful you've chosen to spend some part of your day with us today. On behalf of Yakima Chief Hops, I'd like to formally welcome you all to the inaugural Sustainability Summit. My name is Levi Wyatt. I'm the Corporate Social Responsibility Manager here at Yakima Chief Hops, and I will be your host today. Today we've got an amazing range of folks across the industry who are not only testing new ideas, but they're going to share what they've learned in helping to drive sustainability forward, not only in their industries, but the greater industry at large. You know, at YCH, we always say this, sustainability isn't a solo sport, and it's really up to like building coalitions of like-minded individuals to really enact real change and real progress. Plus, working with a group is always 10 times more fun. So we're just so excited to have you here today and grateful for you to be a part of the conversation. But before we get started, like I mentioned, we have an all-star cast of presenters walking across the supply chain here. But we'd like to cover some housekeeping rules before we get started. We're encouraging everybody, although it's a virtual event, like please collaborate, please network, use the chat and Q&A functions within Teams. Let's have some fun with that. And also as a reminder, this will be recorded, and what we'll be doing is sharing this recording along with presentations and a few other factoids following the event to all the registered attendees, so you can revisit some sessions or catch anything you may have missed. Last but not least, let's have some fun. Let's share together, let's learn together, and let's celebrate the creative sustainability work happening across our industry. Looking at our screen here, you'll see the agenda for today. I will stop talking and let some more folks within the presentations give their intros and start discussing their topics. But we'll begin the conversation at the farm level and continue on down the supply chain. So with our first presenters, I'd like to introduce Andy Livesay, the farm manager at Westwood Farms, and Brian Muegge, the farm program manager at Salmon Safe. I'll take it away, guys.
Good morning. Hey, thanks, Levi. Super excited to be here. And I know Brian is too. I'll start out with a brief overview and introduction here. I guess really excited to be on stage here with a bunch of really great influential folks in the industry, and super excited to be a part of the YCH organization and a group that supports these kind of efforts. And so, yeah, I'll kick it off here. I know we're possibly waiting for Brian here. A note, I just got a text, so maybe Sean reach out to him, make sure he gets on in his presenting capacity. So today we're gonna cover an introduction to the Salmon Safe organization and an introduction to Westwood. And then the goal is to break into a little bit of a discussion between Brian and I. Brian and I have known each other, that's Brian Muegge with Salmon Safe, have known each other for close to 10 years, working with Salmon Safe in my capacity as a crop advisor first, and helping farmers implement Salmon Safe programs, and now as a farm manager at Westwood Farms, growing hops in partnership with Salmon Safe. So Brian and I go back a long time. The Coleman family, who I work for, was one of the early adopters of Salmon Safe here in the Northwest hop scene. And so, yeah, we're really excited to talk about this really long-term partnership that has helped drive a lot of great agricultural practices. And then following our discussion, we're going to launch into a Q&A with the audience. So really excited to take questions from all of you. Brian, are you out there?
I am.
All right, take it away, buddy.
Nothing like a good Teams tech scare to start the morning, so sorry for the tardiness, but thanks everyone for signing on today and being interested in this topic, and big thanks to Levi and the YCH crew for putting this together and inviting me to speak, so I appreciate it. And yeah, thank you, Andy, for giving a bit of an overview on our program, at least from the farm side, and we'll dive into more of that later. But for some folks, I'm sure, who are working within the craft beverage industry in the Pacific Northwest may have heard of our program or quite familiar, but Salmon Safe is an environmental certification nonprofit that we were started in the late 90s from another nonprofit called Pacific Rivers, which was a fish and river advocacy conservation nonprofit. So we spun out from that, really focused on trying to drive voluntary conservation efforts with landowners, farmers throughout the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, that's essentially the mission of our organization, and we're still to this day working very closely with farmers to both promote on-farm conservation and climate resiliency, while also working on market development and incentives to better elevate conservation in ag. So next slide, Andy. So as I mentioned, our beginnings were in actually the Rogue River Valley first, starting this work with viticulturalists, and then we slowly moved further up into the Willamette Valley, and now work with farmers all the way from BC to Wyoming to Northern California. So as I mentioned, we started this work with landowners focused on incentivizing voluntary action with farmers. We learned very quickly that there are other opportunities within watersheds to improve water quality and incentivize these practices across the urban and rural continuum. And so we have since developed other certification frameworks similar to our farm program that address infrastructure, the built environment, components such as campuses, parks, and natural areas, and urban development too, which for today I won't get into a ton of, but just wanted to give context that that's also where we're working as well. So next slide. So as Salmon Safe began and we set out on our journey, our main goal was to improve cold, clean, and abundant water for fish through these practices. So how do you achieve that on the landscape? We worked with scientists, stakeholders, experts to develop a certification framework in order to highlight what those are. And essentially, through 30 years, we've discovered that is in-stream habitat protection, if present, riparian and wetland area protection, erosion management, water use and irrigation efficiency, integrated pest management, which we'll talk much more about here in a moment, and biodiversity and climate resiliency. So how on your farm are you protecting native species, native habitats, beneficial insects? So yeah, so that is our core criteria. Next. So I like to show this graphic as a helpful reminder of what the practices equate to long term. I have used the example of if anyone's played sports before or is maybe training up for something as an adult, like a marathon, when you are in the middle of your training in the summers and it's really hot and it's brutal, and then basically you're training for that fourth quarter, or the third period, or that final push when the going gets tough. And so that's kind of how I have interpreted our standards. So as you are embedding these practices and transitioning these practices on the landscape, you're strengthening essentially your farm or your land for what is July, August heat, drought, etc. So, from reducing tillage, which enhances soil biology, to integrating native biodiversity to better account for species loss and improve habitat. It's all related, and so this is why I kind of show this slide, to bring it all together. Next. Yeah, we've had this question posed to us as Salmon Safe since really the beginning. There's farmers and landowners that would like to be a part of environmental certification, and just inherently altruistically. And then, of course, there's people that other landowners who want to join, but of course, really need to see a stronger benefit, whether that be financial or other. And so we too very early on discovered this and have been working very hard to implement it. So as much as I wish I could wave a magic wand and say that Salmon Safe certified farms get 15% of a price premium, that's highly elusive. And in lieu of not having that, what we have done is worked very diligently within each sector of ag that we work in, and really try to, from farm to pint, incentivize and educate supply chain individuals and stakeholders to better elevate and highlight Salmon Safe certified products, carry the label, do retail campaigns and these sorts of things that, while we can't get the price premium, we could certainly drive demand. And so we've been doing quite a bit of that for 25 plus years. Some of the other benefits of getting certified in our program is, mitigation of regulatory risk, as our program is voluntarily done by landowners. It's kind of a good way for them to continue to stay on the front foot of what regulations may come down. A good example of this in the hops industry is MRLs. So it's pesticide residual levels and measurements for the exportation market. And as those continue to get more strict globally, we've found that growers in our program are already really well positioned to make those changes necessary because they're already improving their integrated pest management program. So next slide. Yeah, so the many pathways of certification, essentially, I haven't described this, but for just maybe a brief rundown on environmental certification, our third-party independent assessor, who we will contract out to do on-farm assessments, and they will, similar to the organic program or other certifications, review pertinent records such as irrigation, input records, farm maps, etc. More information to look holistically across the landscape and see how does the farm practices compare as a baseline to our program. And then once that report is completed, Salmon Safe will then issue either a conditional or unconditional certification. Conditional meaning, which is much more prevalent in our world, something within our standard needs to be improved. We will send that to the farmer. The farmer will then sign a copy of that and send it back to us. And then they will be a part of our program. And then within the 3-year certification cycle, or perhaps even beyond, depending on the size and scope of the condition, we will work with them to connect to technical assistance and other resources to achieve that. And that could be anything from improving riparian habitat to reducing harmful pesticides that we flagged as deleterious to fish and water quality, and beyond. And as we do that, we've also over the years worked to not only offer the certification as a standalone, just by itself, but also integrate and overlay our program when applicable with other certification programs already working within these sectors. So, as we began working with wine, which is really our first, wine grapes is really our first ag sector. We've done a lot of work to either embed our program within existing frameworks, such as Live Certified, long-time Oregon-based wine certification nonprofit, or overlay, such as some of the work that we've done with Sustainable Washington, which is Washington State's wine grape certification, as well as Oregon Tilth, which is an organic certification. So growers who are already in the organic program can essentially overlay themselves with our program, and that extends further to reducing inputs like copper, which is an organic approved chemistry or input, yet can be pretty harmful for water quality, and then other biodiversity improvements and irrigation efficiencies. So just wanted to kind of showcase our mission, which has really been trying to get our practices on the ground through other partners. So next slide. Yeah, and just kind of highlighting, I'll run through these slides pretty quick, but just wanted to highlight some of the market-based work that we do and incentivize. So a lot of that has to do with logo usage, and that's something that we work very diligently with retailers and partners to ensure occurs, because that helps everyone. When a label is shown, it shows that there is a level of rigor and requirement around it. So this is a Wilcox Farms, which is a poultry farm in the southwestern Washington, and this is a private label with PCC. You can see our label there. Next slide. I think a little bit more germane to this audience is the work we've done in beer, which is one of the main sectors that we work in through our hops and grain partnership. And so we've, for again, close to 20 years at this point, have worked very closely with hop growers, grain growers, suppliers like Yakima Chief Hops and others, breweries and retailers to really elevate and showcase what salmon safe hops are. And it's just really helpful when breweries decide to carry the label. And it's really a great showcase. Earth Day, we usually get quite a bit of collaboration and efforts, as is Fresh Hop Season. Those are kind of the two peaks of activity for salmon safe beer highlights. And so we're really excited to showcase that. And this one's from Frame from the past couple of years. Birthday. Next slide. And as I said, the level of rigor that we've gone through with carrying the label for Salmon Safe, we've even segmented our logo to ensure that when hops are sourced to a high enough degree, which for our labeling guidelines, we match the organic program. So 95% or more of products have to be certified in order to carry the label. And so sometimes in beer specifically, there may be some base malt that's used that's not in our program, but all the hops are. So we've created a label specifically for both hops and grain if they're not both 95% or more. So this is Hopworks in Portland. Another work that we've been doing over the past 10-ish years is really with grain growers as well, specialty grain throughout the Inland Northwest and Pacific Northwest. Copperworks over in Seattle did a great salmon safe whiskey release back in 2021. This is our first technically salmon safe whiskey, which had just all sorts of buzz, which was really helpful and very tasty. So that was really exciting to see. And then, as we've been working further in the Pacific Northwest, we've really focused on the Inland Northwest as well, given some of our grant funding. And we've worked with some cooperatives with grain, such as Shepherd's Grain, to highlight salmon safe throughout their packaging as well. So next. Yeah, as I just mentioned, we do have further grant funding. We've always been funded really through a mosaic of private and public dollars, whether that be with the Department of Ecology, Oregon Department of Ag, the Department of or EPA. I mean, plenty of partners, and over the past 3 years, we've been funded through the EPA's Columbia Basin Toxics Reduction Program, which is a program specifically in Region 10 of EPA, which is our Pacific Northwest region that focuses on voluntary toxics reduction. And that is how we have been able to expand our work across the Columbia Basin, which is a large swath of land that encompasses all the way from Oregon's Willamette Valley through Jackson, Wyoming, essentially. And so working with landowners to offset the cost of our program, and then also provide offset costs for technical assistance when we can find it and work with it. So another project that I'm really excited about, I'm actually going to Bend later this afternoon for KernzaCon. I don't know if anyone else is joining, but because of our work in grains, particularly specialty grains, we've been highly interested in perennial grains in the Pacific Northwest, given the climate and carbon benefits, soil benefits. And so we were a partner on a grant with the Coeur d'Alene tribe looking to pilot Kernza on tribal ground, and then also monitor the carbon sequestration benefits of that, in addition to some native Palouse prairie ecotypes that they also have on the reservation, and just getting an understanding of how those two compare from a carbon sequestration perspective, and then ultimately how they can be implemented at a larger scale across the reservation and beyond. So I think that might be my last slide, Andy. Yeah. Oh yeah, here we go. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. So I'll get to talk a little bit more here as we dive into salmon safe work at Westwood Farms, what this looks like on the farm level. So just wanted to give a little bit of background for folks that don't know or haven't met us at Westwood. We're a family run hop farm. We're fairly small, located in the Willamette Valley, and we're really focused on regenerative agriculture and sustainability, and very values driven, and that runs all throughout the organization, and part of the reason why we're really excited to be here today. And that's something that the organization's always supported, both on the ground and outreach, and really being a leader in the industry, especially in this department. So super excited to be here. Here's a little bit, just like I said, where we are. We're just north of Salem, right down in the Willamette River floodplain, and got crops and projects here. But we're predominantly a hops farm. We grow a few hazelnuts, and we're into our second year of malting barley production on a small scale. So that's been really exciting, and included native habitat restoration. We do a lot of that on our lands as well. So I'll try to breeze through this so we've got time for our discussion section. So yeah, we basically, what sustainability looks like at Westwood Farms, we've got 3 pillars that we've identified and focus on. So you'll see a lot of overlap with what Brian just shared, and with Salmon Safe, and I think Salmon Safe deserves some credit for helping us on the farm level develop these. So number 1 would be biodiversity. Number 2 would be water quality, and number 3 would be climate resilience. And I want to stress this again and again to folks. The farm, it's a holistic ecological system. All of these things are always tied together, for the benefit of the crops and for the benefit of the local ecosystem and the environment. So I really, while we segment these out, I really always stress to folks and that they are very much linked. We are a part of the local ecosystem. So I'll talk a little bit on sort of the key management objectives we look at from a biodiversity standpoint. This is a picture of one of our YCH mosaic yards here this spring. Just to give a little context for kind of what we're doing on the ground and what stuff looks like. So we try to minimize disturbance as much as we can. Any kind of disturbance that disrupts those ecosystems is something we try to avoid. Encouraging infield diversity. You can see we've got quite a diversity of plants. We try to let things get a little bit wilder whenever possible. Protecting and restoring native habitats, and then toxics reduction. And Salmon Safe's really been a big part of all these, but their guidance on the toxics reduction from a scientific standpoint is really helpful for small farms like us. On the water quality side, from a farm management perspective, there's sort of 3 key things we try to do. So we're reducing soil erosion whenever possible, reducing any kind of agricultural runoff off of our fields whenever possible, and then focusing on water conservation. We'd rather leave the water in the ground or in the river than pull that out, take it away from the ecosystem, and put it on our fields. So that's something we've done a lot of work in, and we're continuing to focus on that a lot this year. Actually, we just installed our soil moisture sensor network, and we're running all micro irrigation. It's on an automated system. So really, really focused on dialing that in, and yeah, it's been super exciting. So I welcome everyone's input at the end of this. I know I'm sort of breezing over high level, big things. And so, yeah, very excited to dive into any of these in more detail with all of you anytime. So, and then our third pillar, climate resilience, that's obviously a huge focus of our whole society and global society at this point. We're all bearing the impacts of this. There's a lot of other benefits for all of these management practices. So increasing soil carbon storage also helps nutrient retention in the soil, helps the crops do better, all those things. It also sequesters a lot of carbon in the soil, and then reducing our operational emissions. So the current projects on that front, no-till farming has been a big part. We're being as regenerative as we possibly can. So reducing tillage to an absolute minimum, continuous cover cropping. We just did a very ambitious compost application this year. And then we're at initial stages of our soil carbon monitoring project, which is in collaboration with the NRCS. We've got a solar energy install planned and other energy efficiency projects around our hop processing facilities too. So we're a fairly new business. We've been going into our third hop harvest this year. So we don't have all of this completed, but we're working towards all these things as we speak. So that's just a little bit of background on where Westwood sits, and I hope you all appreciated the overlap with what Brian presented, and Salmon Safe has, again, been a huge part of that. I wanted to leave, before we jump into discussion here, I spoke to my local soil health extension agent yesterday, and she said, you should do a back of the napkin calculation to contextualize what we're talking about when we talk about no-till and regenerative and all this stuff. And I was blown away by this. So we'll end on this for my section, but top 6 inches of soil, and that's only the top 6 inches, but that's a common calculation, is 2 million pounds in weight. So our average soil organic carbon we've been testing is 1.13%. So you start to multiply all this out. The 3.67 is a conversion factor to get to CO2 equivalents. So that's what the 82,924 pounds of CO2 equivalent per acre is sitting in our soil. Multiply that out by our 900 acres, you end up with 74,631,000 pounds of CO2 equivalent in the soil on our little farm. 1 gallon of diesel is about 22.5 pounds of CO2 equivalent per gallon burnt. And the goal of where we're going with our regenerative projects is specifically around climate resilience is to bump our 1.13 to say a 1.23. So 0.1%. That equals, if we're able to do that, the 6,600,000 pounds of CO2 equivalent, which, if I'm doing my math right, and there's a chance that I might not be, but this is what I came up with is basically it's equivalent to 300,000 gallons of burnt diesel if we were able to do that, which is more than we'll ever use in the lifetime of our farm. So just the impact of this, I don't think it is talked about, but I think we all need to focus on the producer side. Our land management practices have a lot larger impact than probably our fuel efficiency or any of that. So with that, how are we doing on time, Levi?
Y'all have about 5 or 6 minutes left.
Okay. Brian, you want to hop into a discussion here?
Yeah, thank you. Do you want me to just ask you, we've got the cat's out of the bag. We do have some pre-worked questions for you, but I'll start.
Fire away.
So I kind of glazed over a little bit of our integrated pest management approach, but really that I think is the meat and potatoes of our program in terms of really flagging inputs that farmers use, whether or not they're even if they're approved for use in the sector, of course, there could still be deleterious impact to watersheds and water quality. So, can you describe a bit more your farm's integrated pest management approach and how Salmon Safe has been a benefit and a partner in that?
Yeah, so I'm glad we put this question in, and this is a key point of discussion. It's a key focus of Salmon Safe, and it's really a key focus of my job as a hop farm manager. Is making sure that we end up with a really high quality crop at the end, and it's there's a lot that goes into that, and so yeah, I guess it really starts for me, with some of the guidelines laid out in Salmon Safe. So Salmon Safe sort of provides a framework to manage IPM in a responsible fashion, right? And that's really helpful. As a small farm, you're worried about a lot of things. You don't necessarily have the bandwidth to build a giant, IPM framework that's written out. Salmon Safe provides that. It's really awesome. So we focus on a lot on ecology, right? So once again, like really looking at predator-prey relationships, fostering biodiversity. We're treating based on the ground scouting, right? So we've got team of crop scouts. We have really moved away from any kind of scheduled treatment regimes and are totally focused on, hey, what kind of biology is out there happening in our fields, and how do we work with that to get a quality crop in an environmentally sustainable way. Where the biodiversity part has really come in and where we've seen huge differences over the past few years, and this is not just on our farm, this is a common observation. I think a lot of farms are moving the same way, is really fostering plant biodiversity. So I mentioned all those diverse cover crops, which leads to insect biodiversity, which leads to a diversity of predator and prey out on the landscape. And so we're really finding that we're just not having to treat with many insecticides anymore, because we've got that natural ecology that exists out in our forests and grasslands and everything starting to build up in our hop yards. And so that's been one of the biggest impacts I think I've seen, as we've implemented these programs. I'm going to ask you one, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead. I think for time, just ask the number 3 question, I think is the good.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay,
so you touched on this a little bit, but adding value through certification while rewarding producers for environmentally responsible practices is a challenging puzzle that many organizations have tried to solve. What challenges does Salmon Safe face, and how can producers and consumers help incentivize and reward responsible practices?
Yeah, I did touch upon this briefly. This has been really a focal point for our program. On farm, like I said, we've really tried to improve our standards and cyclically update them, improve IPM. But as it relates to market development, it's tough. We're a small organization. We have 4 full-time staff, a couple contract staff. So we're a small group. So we really rely upon our supply chain partners to help wave the flag of Salmon Safe and carry that through. We have probably directly worked with over 100 breweries and probably over 200 wineries, if not more, over the years, to directly personally educate people on what it looks like, what is Salmon Safe, why carrying the label is important, and why that matters. And one of the techniques that we use in addition to label usage is QR codes as well. Just given the digital age, that's something that's a quick way that people can go, oh, what's that fish logo? Oh, there's a QR code. Oh, okay, that's what voluntary incentive practices are. So So yeah, it's definitely tough, and I want to commend YCH for the work they've done over the years to help support us. With that, they have a lot of growers and grower owners that are in our program, and so there's always room for improvement, though, and I think if there are any, suppliers and breweries or other retail partners on this call, um, I think the best thing that would support us all from the farmer to salmon safe throughout the supply chain would be to carry the logo and have other sorts of messaging around what that means to be, conservation ag focused. And yeah, we're happy to connect with anyone to help educate. So, but yeah, thank you. And I think we're at time. It's 8:35, so I want to be cognizant. But thank you again, Levi.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Andy, Brian, thank you guys. That was amazing. I think it's safe to say there's a lot of passion behind the work that y'all are doing at the farm, and the work that happens there carries on throughout the supply chain. And that's going to be our next step on the journey here for the Sustainability Summit. So we've had opportunity to kind of like look at the groundwork that's happening at the farm, and now we're going to take a little zoom out a bit from the field and into the brewery to see how this all shows up in practice inside one of arguably the most recognized breweries in the world. I'm very excited to be handing this over to Ashley Koller, who's a sustainability program manager for Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. So, Ashley, please take it away.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry about that. All
good.
right, so I'm Ashley Koller. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager at Sierra Nevada Brewing Co. I kind of want to echo what Andy and Brian said. Thanks for hosting this, Levi and the YCH crew. I'm really excited to be here to talk about Sierra Nevada, and I think we're already Salmon Safe certified, but if not, I'm going to go sign up. I really liked Andy and Brian's presentation, so really appreciate that. So for today, I'm going to be talking about the history of Sierra Nevada, a little bit of our ambitions towards Hop Forward, which is our newly launched sustainability strategy. And then I'm going to share a handful of projects that we've been working on to reduce our impact. So to start off with, for any of you that don't know, Sierra Nevada has been around for about 45 years, a little over 45 years. We were founded in 1980 in Chico, California. You can see Ken there on the right up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is our namesake. He spent a lot of his younger years hiking and biking in the mountains. He's an outdoor enthusiast and an environmentalist at heart, and really built the Sierra Nevada brewery with alignment on those values. So things like resourcefulness, innovation, efficiency have always been kind of part of his core values and have translated into the core values of our organization. The photo in the very back there, that's our first brew house. It's just about 1.5 miles that way on Gilman, and it's kind of where we got our start. Ken was using repurposed dairy equipment, as you can see in the top there, and then some old bottling lines, which you can see in the bottom. So again, making sure that we're using everything we have available to us has kind of been part of our company from the very beginning. About, I think 12 years ago now, we outgrew our Chico location and expanded from our hometown to our second home, as we call it, in Mills River, North Carolina. You can see the brewery over here. This is our North Carolina location. Brian Grossman, who's Ken's son, is the head brewer over there and kind of manages the day-to-day operations. And we've got Sierra Grossman, who you can see also in that photo, who's helping run the brewery here in Chico. So as our cans say, we are family owned and operated, and occasionally argued over. I don't see that too much, but I do get to work with the Grossmans, and it's a great family to be a part of. I think, as I kind of mentioned, those kind of values that the company was built on, 45 years ago, you can still see them holding true today, which I think is really hard to do. We are still privately which is really important for sustainability because we're able to make a lot of our decisions on, we make our decisions on core values as opposed to maybe just taking into account the bottom line. Obviously, when we're making big capital expense projects, we are also taking the bottom line into account, but we have the luxury and we have a really great family in charge that we're able to make decisions maybe that other companies wouldn't get to make. And one kind of example of that is this hot rot down here. This is our hot rot in-vessel composting system. And when we purchased that, I think the ROI on the project was like 10 or 15 years, something crazy. Again, something that most people wouldn't invest in, but because there was no industrial composting in the area, Ken had made the decision that it was worth us investing in because it solved the problem that we had. And so, these long-term investments and this long-term thinking, generational thinking about the company has really helped build our sustainability program, but also helped make us a leader in innovation and quality and all these other things that we're well known for. And I guess just to kind of top it all off, very recently, we, I think, kind of moved into the second largest craft brewer spot. We were the third largest in the nation for quite a while. So we're excited to be in that second spot. And we've worked really hard to get there. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, granted our history is kind of like founded in sustainability, but kind of to kind of dive into the sustainability aspect a bit more. So on the sustainability team, we define sustainability by kind of two different buckets. We've got our operational actions and then our systems change actions. So operational actions, as it sounds, it's within our operation. So it's within our four walls. And so it's what we have the ability to kind of have more of an impact on. So things like zero waste and creating closed loop systems, those are really important for our operational actions. We're also spending a lot of time thinking about continuous improvement and how we can make, the systems and the equipment that we already have work more seamlessly. And then inclusion and engagement is a big part of our sustainability because here at the brewery, sustainability is very important, but we also think about the social aspects. So how do our employees, get along and how are we engaging with them on site is really important to us as well. And then the system change or the things outside of our four wall are things like our supply chain. So a lot of you, other breweries that we, collaborate with on innovative projects, or even our growers, hops, barley. So supply chain, we think a lot about our supply chain and how to support the folks that we're working with, but also how we can make sure that everyone is getting to that goal of being maybe just a little bit more efficient and a little bit more sustainable. We spend a lot of time advocating as well. We advocate for the brewing industry, and we advocate for our growers, and then we advocate for things that are important to us. So we try to kind of drive the change that we want to see when we do that through our advocacy. And we're also spending a lot of time thinking about our communities. Both here in Chico, California, and Mills River, we're trying to see, how can we best invest in our community and support it to make sure that our breweries can thrive here, but also our communities can thrive. So I mentioned that our ambitions are to hop forward, and hop forward is what we're calling our new sustainability and social impact strategy. So it's really just a new name for how we've always worked, but it puts a little bit more of a kind of like a roadmap. So like the slide says, it's a strategic roadmap with defined ambitions for 2030. And as part of this roadmap, we've committed to 3 annual things. So an annual impact report to share progress, an annual beer, of course. We couldn't, build a new sustainability strategy and not have a beer to kind of showcase all the different things we're working on. And then an annual company goal where we are really trying to focus on improvements around water, energy, and production waste. So in 2026, this is what it looks like for us. So we've got Hop Forward, our beer. This year we brewed the beer with some of our estate barley. And I'll get to our estate program in a little bit, but basically we grew some of the barley that we put in this beer on site, which is something we're really proud of. And Stay tuned for what we're doing next year. We're already talking about ingredients and stuff. I'm really excited what we're going to do. In the middle, you can see our impact report. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I highly recommend it. It's only, I think, like 15 pages. And it's got a lot of really good information. Honestly, I'm going to talk about a lot of the stuff that's in there, but it's a really great place if you're looking for some inspiration or just maybe some more information on what we're up to. And then on the right, both breweries, so our Mills River location and our Chico location, we are hyper-focused on reducing our water per barrel, excess and obsolete. So that's like the different kind of production waste, so both raw materials and packaging, and then energy. So the amount of purchased energy that we're getting from their grid, we're really trying to maximize the energy that we are producing on site. So we're purchasing less from the grid. So this is kind of a highlight of what we're really focused on this year. And this is all of our 2030 ambitions. So we've got 5 different pillars that we're working towards. And over the next few slides, I'm going to highlight some projects that we are working on in each one of these categories. But this is, kind of our North Star, or maybe top of the trellis right now, is to get to all of these goals that we've set out for ourselves by 2030. So tread lightly. This is our first pillar, as you saw on that last slide, and it's really focused on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And so the next few slides are going to be kind of highlighting our energy programs, really, because that's kind of the biggest impact when it comes to our scopes on site. So we have solar arrays at both of our locations. In Mills River, it covers a warehouse, and in Chico, basically covers every rooftop that we've got available. We have the largest solar array in the craft industry. So we've got about a 2.5 megawatt system, roughly, I think, a little over 10,000 panels, maybe close to 11. But we've got a lot of solar panels on site. And in Chico, California, because we have so many panels here, we're able to generate about 20% of our electricity needs using on-site solar generation. And kind of talking about how we're always looking to do continuous improvement projects. Solar has been a really good example of that in the last year. These assets are in Mills River, about 10 years old, and in Chico, our solar is getting to be about 20 years old. So we've spent a lot of time in the last year fixing broken panels and home run wiring and other wiring related issues. And we've actually seen an increase in our on-site generation by about 20%, which is pretty crazy because it's a fixed asset. It's not going to get, we're not adding any more panels. We're just fixing some of the small issues that we're finding, and we've seen a big benefit. So, our on-site solar is really helpful. If any of you are familiar with time of use pricing, here in Chico, it really helps us cut down on those costs during the middle of the day. So, on-site solar has been something that we're really proud of. The next kind of thing I'm going to highlight in Chico is our biogas project. So this project was implemented about a year ago. And so how this project worked is we kind of had a few things in place. We've had our wastewater system for about 20 years. We've had our capstone microturbines for quite a while. But we kind of bought this middle piece of equipment right here, which is a biogas blending skid. And what this does is it takes biogas from our wastewater treatment facility and it pressurizes it and it blends it together with natural gas. And then this biogas, natural gas mixture is fed into our capstone microturbines. The microturbines combust this gas. It creates electricity and it also creates steam. And the steam we use as a byproduct to preheat boilers and to preheat other things at the brewery. So we're reducing our natural gas load in another way. And then a small added bonus, or I guess not small, but another added bonus of this whole system is that we have a battery backup system, about a 1 megawatt battery backup system. And so when solar is going on and we've got our on-site capstone or microturbines working. If there's any excess electricity, we can charge up this battery system so we can deploy it, later in the day when peak pricing is in effect. So this project has been really great. So since we got the biogas blending skid online, we were able to reduce our on-site natural gas consumption by about 30%. So taking something that we're already generating on site, which is biogas in our wastewater plant, and we've captured it and turned it into something that we're able to help reduce our costs, has been a really huge benefit for the brewery. Another Chico highlight is our electric vehicles. So I like to say that we've electrified every step of our process here. So the top vehicle is our grain truck. So we have a rail spur about 1.5 miles from here, where we get our grain in from rail cars. We load it up into this truck here, and it's brought over to the brewery. So raw ingredients coming into the facility, we've electrified. Then we've got our yard goat, which moves trailers around the facility. We also have a fleet of electric forklifts, which are really great. So we've kind of have around the facility electrified. And then we just bought this truck up here on the right, which does distribution into the city of Chico. It's part of what we call Chico Route. And so, so every part of the kind of production process has been electrified, and we wrote, I think, 7 different grants to get these 3 vehicles, and they've been great so far. We're thrilled to have them, and they've been operating kind of as anticipated. So this has been a really exciting project that's kind of taken place in the last year, and it's reducing our diesel consumption quite a bit. So that's been a nice benefit to see as well. So the Mills River highlight that I want to talk about is our LEED certification. So LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And when we started building the brewery in 12 years ago, we decided that we wanted to take the 20 or 35, I guess, years of experience that we had at the time and build this amazing brewery. And we did that. And we were trying to think of, how do we get to that next level? How do we really make sure that it's as efficient as possible? It's as the best it could possibly be. And so we decided to pursue LEED. Our goal was to get a silver level certification, but we ended up with a platinum level certification. And that has to do a lot with the work around energy efficiency that we did in this brew house. So when you compare our Mills River brewery to other similar production breweries, this one is about 50% more efficient. And that's just how we built our, cooling systems, our heating systems. And so it's kind of a huge feat. And because LEED certification is a one-time certification, we have to continuously maintain our Mills River operations to, again, maintain the benefits. And we've been doing a really good job at that. The team there is excellent, and they've been making sure that the brewery has been as efficiently as run as possible. So in a conclusion for Tread Lightly, I'm not going to stay on this slide for very long, but I just kind of listed out some of the resources that have been very helpful for us over the last year to kind of achieve all those projects. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, or maybe if you come back and look at the presentation later, these have been very, very helpful resources for us in the last year. A few that I'll call out. The DOE has really great boot camps. They also have great in-plant trainings, and they have some really good tools. Their measure tool online is really helpful when you're trying to track energy efficiency projects. So hopefully this is helpful for some of you out there, but I am going to move on to our Be Resourceful category. So this category is more about our materials that we have on site. So think like water, waste, and our farming operation. So we are a zero waste certified facility. We are platinum certified at both locations, and we divert about 99.7% of our waste from landfill. And so you can see on that last bullet, we also generate a bunch of savings. So net savings of about $150,000. And that's because we're able to sell a lot of the materials that we generate on site, and then save on landfill costs. So our zero waste program is something that we're really proud of. And if anyone out there is trying to get a sustainability program off the ground, I always recommend maybe starting with zero waste. Employees love it, and it's a great place to get started. Reuse in rainwater. So we're always looking for ways. I think we mentioned our company goal is to reduce the amount of water we're consuming per barrel. And so we kind of do this through two different things. So reuse. So that photo on the left is our wastewater treatment plant in Chico. And what we did recently was we started using effluent. So the water that would otherwise be going down in the drain to the city, we've taken that and reused it for some spraying some screens and some other things within our wastewater treatment process. And our estimates are we're going to save about 2 million gallons of water doing that. So we're really excited about that small project, but it's big impact. And then in Mills River, we have these cisterns that capture water off our roof. We also have cisterns under the ground. And so they're really helpful with reducing the amount of water that we have on site. And then the other cool thing that we're able to do is then send this water through our engineered steam our stream bed, which is right here. And that, looks pretty, but it really has a great benefit for the environment. We're able to let the water settle on its way to the French Broad. So we're not putting kind of this lesser quality water into the river. And we're able to make sure that we're whatever's coming from our property is not going to impact the ecosystem. So rainwater, we also reuse on site and things like toilets and in some places for irrigation. So trying to reduce our water consumption is a big goal for us. And then agriculture, I think we have some growers on the call. So I don't know if you know this. Obviously, we're a brewery first, but we do have quite a bit of agriculture at both of our locations. So we have 1 acre of estate produce, 8 acres of hops here in Chico, and 100 acres of barley. We also have chickens and some seasonal grazing goats. We actually have the goats on site right now. They're so cute. We have in Mills River 4 acres of estate produce. So they're growing quite a bit more produce over there. They've got 250 mushroom logs, and then they've got a big property that's partially managed with some chickens, some sheep, and donkeys that live there year round. As a company, though, for agriculture, as part of our Be Resourceful category, we have a goal of purchasing 50% of our raw materials from regenerative or sustainable certified practices. So we're trying to figure out the best certification, or maybe the best way to certify that what we're receiving and what we're putting into our products is sustainably grown. So I guess this is kind of a call out to anyone on the call. If you know of a great certification, I think Levi and I have been talking, and the folks at YCH, we've been talking about the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative, so SIA. If you know of any other certifications that you would really hype up, or maybe you're using the Cool Farm tool, I'd personally love to hear from you. I'll put my contact information is at the end, so if you want to reach out. But as for agriculture, we're doing really big things like on site, but we have a lot of work to do kind of in that scope 3 space around our supply chain. So hopefully someone reaches out. But anyways, that's what we're doing for agriculture. And again, here's just like a snapshot of some resources that I have found really helpful in the last year or so. So if you want to screenshot it, you can. All right, and I have just a few more slides. So chart a course, again, is kind of our category around sharing what we're doing and sharing with the wider world. And so what we do, aside from submitting an annual report, putting it on our website, we also advocate at the local, state, and federal level. So we're advocating for things like climate change, water and natural resources, circular economy, and we're also working really hard to protect and make sure that outdoor spaces are accessible to all. So there are some photos of Mandy doing hill climbs. We also write lots of letters of support. And we also, I think last year I did a farm bill hill climb, which was really great. I had a really great time talking to all the folks that are working on a lot of the things that you guys are passionate about. Work well. So this is our category around employee and employee wellness. So we have a huge employee engagement program. And so I mentioned that we have a sustainability and social impact team. So there's 2 folks on our team now that are doing a lot of this work. So working with HR to make sure that promotions are happening internally. And we had about 200 internal promotions last year, which is great. We have a free on-site medical clinic for employees and their families. which is crazy, and something that I take advantage of here all the time, which is really good perk of the brewery, and again, really shows the values that Ken set out are still in place. Last year, we reduced our safety incidents by 20%, and we have very successful employee programs. So you can see little snapshots there on the right of our Hatch program and our Prost platform. And in 2025, and just last week, we were in 2026, we were nominated as the greatest place to work. We received recognition. So we're doing a lot, and I think it's showing that we're doing a lot in this work well category. The last category I'm going to highlight is Go Together. So this is our community kind of section. Trust for Public Lands is a small organization you might not have heard of, but Trust for Public Lands, with them, we've protected over 16,000 acres of California wildlands, and we are working to expand our work with TPL into Western North Carolina, which is our second home. So Trust for Public Lands has been a great organization that we've been working on and being able to work with. And then the National Parks Foundation, we've highlighted 6 iconic national parks on our packaging. We've contributed about $35,000 to the National Park System, which is funding conservation, access, restoration projects across the National Park System. So if you haven't tried, the pale ale is the same, but the packaging is different. So if you haven't tried one of these, grab one. It supports a good cause. And then our cascade effect is basically, we have a goal of donating $2 million in 5 years, and we're more than halfway there. Part of the program includes what we call our cascade effect, which is where employee donations, we match them. And so last year, the cascade effect program itself was able to bring $6,000 to local groups. So top of the trellis, like I said, hopefully we can get there together. So if you want to learn more, or you want to kind of learn about some of the stuff I mentioned, we have these really great interactive maps for Chico and Mills River on our website. Great highlights and just kind of a great way to kind of familiarize yourself with the brewery and what we're up to. And then this is my contact information. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, if you are working on agriculture certifications, regenerative, sustainable, please let us know. It's something that we're working on, and we'd love to hear from you. And that's it.
Ashley, that was amazing. Thank you so much for walking us through your programs. You can tell there's excitement and just a lot of buy-in, right? So I think we had a few questions come in, and I'd love to maybe kick over one or two with the 4 minutes we have remaining. We talked about zero waste as being like that first initiative that folks can get involved in. We had a question roll through of like, what platinum zero waste certification did you choose, or what outfit are you going through?
Yeah, that probably would be a good thing to mention. So we went through TRUE, so Total Resource Use and Efficiency is what that certification stands for. And it's the same, it's the certification is kind of part of the USGBC, so it's kind of, it falls in with like LEED and stuff. But that certification is great. Even if you don't actually pursue the certification, they have their certification guidelines are basically like how to start a zero waste program 101. So if you can't convince your company maybe to do the certification, I would highly recommend flipping through that and using it as kind of a roadmap to creating a zero waste program. But so it's TRUE, 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 zero waste.
Oh, thank you for that. One more question I can sneak in here.
I have a real quick comment, and I hate to chime in from the interweb, Ashley, but your Sierra Nevada farm is Salmon Safe certified. You had been curious about that earlier, and the farm took advantage of our Oregon Tilth overlay, and they've done that for close to a decade now. So that's all. Sorry for chiming in, but
all good. And if you guys want to, you should do that too. I think it makes it a lot easier. So thanks, Brian.
Yep. Sorry, Levi.
Oh, full circle. We love this. It's a virtual setting, but we want to make this as like interactive as possible. So thanks for that. One more question for you. You mentioned like, a lot of these investments, these projects, is there one looking back that maybe made a bigger impact than you expected initially when you first set out?
I think we kind of, the one that comes to mind is the biogas blending skid. So again, it kind of was like the middle piece of this like larger puzzle that we were missing. But because we invested in that project, it forced us to look at our capstone microturbines a bit more. And so we realized that some of the microturbines weren't working as efficiently as they could. And some of the heat recovery systems that we had initially connected to them weren't working as they should. So by investing in this biogas blending skid, it forced us to look at the whole system. And because of that, that whole system is now running more efficiently and producing more electricity than it ever has. So I don't know if that necessarily answers the question, but that project has been like a home run, like 2 times over. So we're really proud of the work we've done there. And again, like we're capturing a material that we're creating on site and using it, but then we're also being able to maximize the systems that we already had in place at the same time.
No, that's amazing. It's a huge win in and of itself.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for your time, Ashley. Obviously, there's just like so much care and thought in that. And I encourage everybody on the call and those watching the recording, flip through the Hop Forward report. You know, it's one thing to create metrics, and then they just live on desktops and they don't do anybody any service. So like the fact that you're able to have a creative outlet and demonstrate the work that you're doing in the site, some creative ways of getting people involved is awesome.
I just want to call out that when we were making our report, we used YCH's report as an inspiration. So if you haven't checked out theirs, I would also highly recommend flipping through the YCH report. So sorry to call you out, Levi.
I'll pay you for that comment later. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we're gonna transfer into another key piece of the story when we look at the supply chain. We're really just trying to unpack as much as we can here in the short 2 hours we have. But next up, we're going to look at another key piece of that story, and that's packaging, right? From the design all the way through disposal, it plays a major role in how our products show up in the market, and also an opportunity for us as organizations that are currently doing it or want to get involved in circular economy, the opportunity to do so. So let's please welcome to the stage sustainable packaging and sales marketing guru, Cory Connors, and Darren Drake, the senior packaging sales engineer from Atlantic Packaging. Gentlemen, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Levi. Are we on? Everybody good?
I can hear you, Cory.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for making time for us. This is very exciting to be a part of this and honor. Welcome. It's we're going to be talking about something a little different than the rest of the group. We're talking about packaging, and this is something we all get to be a part of. We all get to interact with daily, cans and bottles and all kinds of different things, and a lot of packaging that maybe you don't think about. So that's something Darren and I are really looking forward to talking about. If you care about sustainable packaging, this is something that we'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast about sustainable packaging presented by Atlantic Packaging. We've been doing this for about 5 years, and it's an incredible labor of love, if you will. I'm going to be doing this presentation kind of as the way that I do podcasting. So that's going to be me basically asking Darren questions. And so I think that this will be kind of a unique format. But Darren, if you could talk to us through kind of the history or kind of what Atlantic Packaging is all about, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Cory. It's great to be here. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Darren Drake. I live in Richland, Washington, and I've been with Atlantic for about 5 years. Atlantic recently celebrated our 75th anniversary. From very humble beginnings to where we are today. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've had fairly explosive growth as we've started to work with some of these larger national brands. We'll talk about some of those today. But a lot of that is around our stretch film must monitoring program and other sustainable packaging programs that we've come out with over the last few years. And we'll talk about some of those today.
Great. Thank you, Darren. Let's dive right in. So shrink film has been kind of a real challenge for a lot of companies, especially companies making beer and brewing different canned items. So let's talk about an example of something Atlantic Packaging has that's a replacement for those plastic materials called Canopy.
Yeah, and are you able to share your screen, Cory, with the slide deck that we put together?
Yeah, I was sharing my screen. I don't know what's going on here.
So yeah, I'll start talking about Canopy. So Canopy
How about
is
now?
kind of a,
Can you see it?
yep,
Okay.
yep. So Canopy is kind of a unique project. We get challenged all the time with, whether using stretch film, which is a plastic material, if that's the most sustainable, most efficient way to contain pallets. Our supply chain, we're shipping pallets from the West Coast to the East Coast, East Coast to the West Coast, and it's absolutely critical that they maintain their integrity and show up in good condition so they can be used. There's nothing less sustainable than having to send them back and destroy them or dumpster them, right? So anyhow, we were being challenged with whether paper could be an alternative to stretch film with wrapping pallets. And what we found was you use pounds of paper compared to ounces of stretch film. Stretch film is the one product, if you use it correctly, you use less of it and it works better. And so anyhow, what we thought instead was, well, hey, why don't we take this paper? We had a Douglas shrink bundler in our solution center in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we said, hey, why don't we try testing it and see if we can run it as shrink bundling film? And so we, our engineers kind of set forth and made a few adjustments, modifications to the bundler, and got this paper to essentially run as a suitable replacement to shrink bundling foam. Now, this was just obviously the very first step. And since then, there's been hours and hours of time put into this project and a complete retrofit design that can be basically retrofitted to an existing shrink bundling system, all types of equipment. So you don't have to, go out and replace your bundling system or get rid of it. It just fits right in. And so it allows you to basically run paper instead of poly, instead of PE shrink bundling film. So, you go to the Costco's, you go to the different box stores, and you got your bullseyes and all the different tray packs are all in plastic now, right? That was a huge corrugated reduction cost savings initiative from, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, whenever shrink was first introduced. Well, turns out shrink bundling film might not be the most sustainable packaging item. So Canopy, being a fiber-based curbside recyclable solution, could be a good replacement for it in some applications. So not only just shrink, but also like corrugated reduction projects too. So if you have like a full overlap box, you could potentially go to like a tray and then use Canopy as like the dust cover, right? So you could reduce your square footage and corrugated as well. We can print on it. The other cool thing about it too is it's actually sourced locally right here in the Northwest from one of Westrock's paper mills.
I got
So
to
right here
visit
in our
that.
backyard.
Yeah, I got to visit that factory just the other day with the IOPP, and it was totally impressive. Thank you, Darren.
You bet.
There we go. All right, next, let's talk about another alternative to plastic packaging that Atlantic Packaging has created called Fishbone.
Yeah, so everybody, I'm sure, remembers those old plastic rings that, your 6 packs of Coca-Cola or Pepsi would come in. And, you saw the videos of the plastic around wildlife, turtles or whatnot. So that's kind of what this is targeting. Nowadays, currently, you have PackTech, which is very common, which again is a poly item. A lot of, I think, PCR resin, though, in the PackTech in some cases. However,
Yes.
this is our fiber-based curbside recyclable solution or alternative to PackTech. It does require equipment. So, I mean, if you're, a smaller brewery and you're just looking at doing some 4 packs and 6 packs for like walk-up business in your brewery or restaurant, there is a manual applicator that's fairly easy to pop these suckers on. So, your customers could leave with a 4 pack or a 6 pack. If you're at a higher level of production and you're interested in more, hundreds of cans per minute, we do have automated versions as well. And a neat little side bit about this is the OEM that we partnered with is actually here in Kennewick, Emerald City Automation. So we've done a ton of work with them. Again, so there's local, to the Northwest in a sense. So, and then, yeah, we do all these in-house in our Tabor City, North Carolina facility. We're able to print, do high quality graphics, And yeah, and then there's also just, stock general options right off the shelf too. So if you want just the generic version.
It's been an incredible system for many of our customers. Thank you, Darren. Really excited to present that alternative. Now, this is a total game changer. A lot of people have talked about alternatives for plastic stretch film that just haven't, frankly, worked out. So what we've done with this system, this patented system, is create a system that uses the least amount of plastic possible in the most efficient way. And Darren, I think you have probably installed more of these with your customers than any of us. So can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, Must is the reason I came to Atlantic Packaging. I had been working for a competitor and came across Atlantic Packaging in a number of different opportunities, and they were basically impossible to knock out. And so I had a couple friends that worked for Atlantic and was fortunate enough to get intro to the right people and get connected and get an opportunity. And yeah, this is really my main point of focus here on the West Coast, was implementing Must in the large, food and beverage industry. And so here, the way it works, really, I mean, like I said earlier, stretch film, if used properly, is the most efficient product for container products by far. We can wrap a beverage load that's 2,500 pounds with 4.5, 5 ounces of film, and then we can maintain that level through Must. And so source reduction really with stretch film is our best sustainability play. There's just no other option right now. No other technology exists that can wrap pallets to the same effectiveness of stretch. So what we focus on with our program is thin gauge, high performance films. So at the Solution Center in Charlotte, as you've seen, Cory, we have a film lab, and we had a polymer chemist on staff that used to work for a number of the largest film manufacturers. And so he developed and patented a number of stretch film, resin combinations that allow us to use less and do more. So essentially, we can come in with a 57 gauge film and get more pounds of containment per revolution and do more than like an 80 gauge film that's a more conventional film that's been around for years, right? So it's like the same thing with cell phones. They're computers now, right? We can do more with less. So and so what we have a whole technical team that supports this program. We call them stretch film application specialists. And so they go in and they work with the customer, and whatever the application or product is, we know the correct wrap patterns through testing, years of testing in the Solution Center. Must was actually really a collaboration with Coca-Cola about 15 years ago. So we were working with them, a number of their bottling plants, and they really loved our technical process and how we would come in and get all the wrappers dialed in and then the wrap patterns dialed in so they're using the correct amount of film. However, what they noticed was as soon as we leave, changes are made. And it's like, well, hey, how can we capture these and keep them in place, right? So they challenged us with coming up with a system. And so that's where Must came from. We're in the 3rd generation now. And I believe we have 1,200 lines that we monitor coast to coast. And again, we have a whole team of stretch film application specialists that cover the whole US. And this, our sole job is to monitor these lines. And so basically, each wrapper gets a health score. We use the Fitbit model. And so it's based on ounces applied, revolutions, and then also productivity with film breaks and or clamp pulls. And so based on those variables, it's going to give a health score. If it's 100% or in the 90s, really no cause for concern, we move on. But it's a really critical program for, if you think like Anheuser-Busch, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, these companies that are pumping out hundreds of thousands of pallets, if their pallets are off by a couple ounces of film, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's critical, and a major CO2 impact too, right? The carbon emissions from using too much stretch film are incredible. So yeah, here's some statistics from 2025. 41 million pounds, 247 million pounds in the last 10 years. I mean, so all this is tracked. This is all data that's been derived and collected. So this isn't just stuff we're making up. And this is compared to the default state, Cory. So when we first go in and do the film audit, if they're using 8 ounces of film, and then we take it to our engineers and experts, and we come up with they really only need 5 to do the job. Well, that's a difference of 3 ounces. And then we take that and times it by the number of loads per year. And then that's the difference. That's how we get these numbers. So, and obviously you can see here that the impact on water is tremendous as well. And there's additional packaging that's saved as well. I mean, anytime we're taking, extra pallets of packaging of stretch film out of the, supply chain, that's a huge impact.
The numbers are staggering. It's incredible. And it's not very often that we see a sustainability win that's also a huge cost savings. And at least that's what the pushback I get often is, oh, this is going to cost us more money, right? And it's so great to be able to come into a company and say, not only are we going to reduce your plastic usage, but you're going to save this much money as well. Incredible. Again, just some more numbers, some more details of the incredible impact this system has had. Congratulations, Darren and the team there. Let's talk about this material reduction and circularity system we've created. It's a first of its kind, as far as I know. It's a recycling program for plastic stretch film, and it is proving to be incredibly impactful. Darren, can you speak to that?
Yeah, this is a tremendous and really cool program, and it's very exciting. So during COVID, Atlantic invested in an ARIMA recycling system, which came from Europe. I can't remember exactly which country, but it took several years for it to get to us. But basically, this system allows us to take bales of stretch film and then create PCR resin that we can actually put back into stretch film that our customers can use. So with this Coca-Cola story, Coca-Cola Consolidated in North Carolina has a number of bottling facilities and I think 50 or 60 distribution centers. So very extensive, presence in the Carolinas. And so what the program is, we supply them stretch film to their bottling plants, machine stretch film, 30-inch, 57 gauge with 18% PCR, post-consumer resin. They wrap their pallets. We monitor them with must to ensure that they're putting on the correct amount so it's sustainable. Those loads, once they're wrapped, they get shipped to their distribution centers. At the distribution centers, that film gets cut and those loads get repalletized for mixed loads that are going to, different retailers, convenience stores, box stores, wherever it might be going. And so when that film gets cut, we capture it, they bale it. And then once we have enough for a truckload, we pick that up and we bring it back to Charlotte to our solution center. We have the recycling system in the back of the building. It's hilarious. And it's a complete industrial setup now. Anyhow, so we take that stretch film. It's got to be high quality, by the way. So to do this, we had to switch them from paper labels to polypropylene labels because the paper labels would burn and cause contamination for the PCR resin. So they had to make that investment and commitment. It's quite an upcharge to go to the polypropylene. However, we are buying the bales back from them at a higher rate than they were getting previously. So we're paying them more per pound to offset that increased label cost. And so then once it gets to Charlotte, we run it through the recycling system. We create high quality PCR resin that we actually then we turn around and sell it back to our extruding partners, Paragon Films, and now Amcor, formerly Berry. And then they put that back into that high performance 57 gauge stretch film at a rate of 18% PCR. And then incredible. We sell that film back to Coca-Cola. And so it's a complete closed loop. As you can see here from this visual here, that film with 18% PCR is available to all of our customers. Unfortunately, the whole closed loop program, I mean, it's got to be the ideal setup. And currently, we only have the one recycling system, and it's on the East Coast. So we do have interest from some West Coast bottlers as well. And as that interest continues to peak down the road, we may be able to see one of those here out west as well. So very exciting program. As you mentioned, it's the only program of its kind for stretch film. And do we have more slides about PCR? Or should I talk about yeah. So the thing I'd say about PCR too is lots of competitors and other film manufacturers have PCR, but what we found is a lot of it is heavier gauge. So you're basically having to use 80 gauge and you get, 20, 30% PCR. They have to offset it and increase the gauge to make it work. So we came up with 18% and we wanted to put it in with our thin gauge film, 57. That's our primary film that we provide most of our customers. And that's through extensive testing. It's no accident, right? That's the best bang for your buck that we found. We can get the most out of it. And so 18%, same thing. The performance is nearly identical to that of its virgin counterpart, right? So we can put up to 18% and we're going to get very similar stretch. We're going to get very similar tear propagation, meaning how long does it take for the film to get severed. Punctures, all that stuff is virtually the same. And so that's why we settled on 18%. If we go any higher than that, the performance, the quality starts to go down, and also the cost. So there's a lot of different variables to consider in coming out with a PCR film. So I would just challenge, if you're looking at PCR as a sustainability solution, you still have to look at the overall impact of virgin resin to that product. It's still the right materials and the right thickness, if you will, for your application is still critical if you're going to introduce PCR.
It's such a great point. It's been a real controversial topic lately. And I think with people using extended producer responsibility laws and trying to reduce their plastic usage and also increase their PCR usage, they're kind of it's a confusing math problem for a lot of people trying to figure out how much PCR and how much film. And I think what we figured out is really a big win for everyone. And here's your example. The 18% is really that key number that's worked so well. So.
Luckily, we have some guys that are really good at math, guys and gals that are good at math.
Great team, Atlantic. Yes, sir. Well, let's talk about New Earth Ventures. It's our sustainability arm for Atlantic Packaging. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So that's another unique thing about Atlantic. So there's a New Earth project, which is a marketing sidearm of Atlantic Packaging, and it's a collaboration with professional surfers and other outdoor enthusiasts to rid the oceans, rivers, lakes of plastic waste. And from that sprung a New Earth Ventures, which is basically our commitment to emerging sustainable technologies. So there's all sorts of products that are being introduced to the market right now that need help and support to get them, basically operationalized, right? And out to the market. And so Atlantic recognized that. And so we created this program where we partner and help support and seed, these upstart companies with emerging technologies around sustainable materials. So some examples would be Cruise Foam, which is, fully compostable styrofoam replacement, and it's made out of shellfish waste. So that's one. There's Sway, which is a seaweed alternative to poly. And I mean, I'm really excited about that one. I mean, there's so many box liners and so many applications I think that could be utilized for. Another one is SpecRite. So everyone's aware of all the EPR laws and how cumbersome that is to get all your, specifications and everything into one place. It's all over the spot place, right? And so SpecRite allows you to bring everything into one place and help you organize that. And so we're supporting them, and there's others. And so as they continue to come to market, we're going to identify them. And if they're on point and in the direction we want to head, we're going to get behind them and support them and help bring them to market.
Exactly. It's been awesome to watch the impact of this in just a short time. It's only been around for a few months, and it's done incredible things already. Like you said, SpecRite, specification management system that's combined with your EPR reporting and everything like that. It's been an incredible savings for a lot of people, and a quick way to make things a lot more efficient. Well, I think that's it, and I think we've got just a few more minutes for possibly some questions. Let's stop sharing. Great.
Yeah, thank you both. That was awesome and super fascinating. The amount of innovation happening, whether it's in your walls or within your partners, is tremendous. So applaud you guys for your effort and your partnership in the industry, trying to reduce waste and champion recyclability. I do have a few questions for you while I got you on the hook. But we talk about sustainable packaging. It can kind of be overwhelming, where to start. What's something that's oftentimes overlooked when it's like trying to tackle transition into sustainable packaging?
You want me to go first, Darren?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of people overlook tape on boxes. And I think that's it's a really simple transition to using paper tape that's recyclable with the box. Oftentimes people aren't aware that there are paper tapes that are cost competitive now with all of these plastic increases. So that's something we go to. But number one, even before the tape, is figure out where you're at and try to figure out what your goals are, and then talk to somebody like us that can really come in and look at your whole system and figure out why you're doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Cory.
Yeah, I would just say, going along with our stretch film program, I mean, it ties into everything. I mean, basically your material usage sustainability is directly correlated with your cost. So everyone's so fixated on cost per roll, cost per pound. Well, how much do you actually use per unit, right? And then, to get that to your end user, right? So there's that. And then also I think mailers, paper mailers. I mean, I know Amazon did a huge transition from poly to fiber, and it was thought it was going to cost them a ton of money. Well, what they realized was they had all the oversized boxes. Remember, we always would get these shipments with a huge box with a little product in there. Well, they right-sized everything, and it ended up being a humongous savings. So if you just right-size your packaging, sustainable and cost-effective.
Incredible impact.
Yeah, that was always funny, opening up this large packaging just to find like a small little toy or whatever it may be.
Right.
And we had one more come in from the cost perspective. I wonder if you could give us like ballpark in terms of like looking at the MUST program. Extremely impressive. The data is like real time, which I think is just like tremendous from an operations perspective. But how does MUST traditionally compare to other conventional film wrap systems, film and the equipment, I guess? And then do you happen to have an average percent reduction in the film used? I know there was a slide with a bunch of numbers, but wondering if you could circle back on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. I mean, I think conventional stretch wrapping, there was nothing that was similar to this. I mean, there's been a few people that have tried to come out with different variations, and that's usually machine driven. So say Landtech, for example, it's a common stretch film wrapper manufacturer, and they have the ability to track some of the same stuff we do. However, it's not automated to the degree that ours is, where ours will send you a report directly to your inbox. The ones that are machine driven, you have to go out and basically put like a USB, or whatever, and download the information or go pull it from the HMI. So it's not nearly as automated. And yeah, I think we have a patent on our system. So I think we're in a pretty good spot with our technology as it stands right now.
What's the percentage reduction, Darren? It's about
yeah. I mean, minimum 15 to 30% and beyond. I mean, I've seen it all over the board. It's usually very significant. I mean, you can just do the math, 57 into 80 as like a common gauge, right? Just gauge to gauge. Plus now we're also typically stretching it further and getting better yield. So it can be tremendous.
Awesome. Thanks for that. How about what's one of the packaging innovations that you're excited to be like seeing gain as much traction as it is?
I think I'm excited to see a lot of the automation equipment that has been worked on for years and years. We keep going to these packaging shows, and they're still they've been working on it for years, and now it's time finally coming to fruition. It's really cool to see, like Darren was saying, right size packaging. We can make the box right in line right now. And make it the right size for that package. We can automatically put the tape on. We can, which is a lot of these things are reducing injuries to warehouse workers. They're having major cost savings and letting workers do things that are much more valuable to the company, which is awesome to see.
I like that.
I would say food packaging. We recently hired a coatings specialist. And so there's been some neat opportunities to take people from plastic, primary packaging into fiber-based packaging. So running on flow wrappers through automation, like Cory said, and but being curbside recyclable. the potential for some of that technology is pretty neat. I think getting out of some of that plastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see the fishbone take off. I think I've yet to see one in our neck of the woods, but I think that concept is brilliant. Making it curbside is the way of the future, making it easy. When it comes to recyclability, people don't want to jump through all the hoops of looking up the number on the back of the bottle or whatever it may be. So that's a simple solution. But kudos to you guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Packaging is definitely one of the most visible touch points when it comes to consumers, especially with sustainability. So it's encouraging to see that level of innovation happening to both promote recyclability and then encourage waste reduction. So thank you both.
Levi, we need to get you on to the Sustainable Packaging podcast soon.
Sign me up.
Love to have you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Levi. Thanks, Cory.
Take care. All right. As we prep for our final session, we're going to turn our attention back inside the brewery and explore a topic that has both become increasingly important from a sustainability perspective, but also a business perspective. And so we're going to be talking about CO2 use, recovery, and why this is so important when it comes to a brewing input. We've got an absolute star-studded cast of brewers, and they've implemented systems all unique, very similar to hop farming, right? There's multiple ways to pick hops. There's multiple ways to capture CO2, and we're going to cover that spectrum today and look at how they're reducing emissions, improving efficiencies, and also just creating value in the process. And so our very own Chief Operating Officer, Carl van Evenhoven, will be moderating this awesome panel. And Carl is responsible for operations, sustainability, and promoting engineering projects here at Yakima Chief Hops. So I'm going to pass the torch over to Carl, but I'm gonna drive our slides here. So give me a minute, guys.
Yeah, well, you're doing that, Levi. I just wanted to share with Cory and Darren. Big part of this event today isn't just to talk about all the cool things that are happening in the world of sustainability, but to create ideas and how we can all work together to make these improvements. And we've got a canning line as well for our CO2 extraction. So maybe the canopy, our volume's not huge in the canning side of things, but could be a way to reduce some cardboard. So we should connect afterwards. So like I said, that's a big part of the spirit of what we're doing here today. So I'd like to kick it off. I'll say a few words about CO2 before I introduce the rest of the panel here. One of the things that brings me joy is this is a mural that's painted on our Extract 2 building that was built in 2022. That's Tom Carpenter, one of our founders that started the company, and the Carpenter family. And he had the dream of building a CO2 extraction plant, which is why Yakima Chief is buying CO2. So CO2 is one of my favorite things to talk about. It's also one of my least favorite things to talk about, and I'll explain a little bit more about that here now. But I've been buying CO2 for like 30 years, and it's a bit of a frustrating experience. There's the CO2 suppliers, there'll be surcharges, there'll be allocations where you can't get product and have to shut down your plants. Of course, both of those are very costly. I will say in the Pacific Northwest, there is one bright spot. Our CO2 supplier, Oxark, they've been buying from the big international suppliers, but they're working on getting their own green sources of CO2. So we do have that bright spot. But what we're going to talk about here today is how to either recover CO2 from operations like CO2 extraction or brewery, or how to do direct capture out of the air. So with that, I'll introduce Vinnie Cilurzo, who's the owner, along with his wife, Natalie, of Russian River Brewing and Santa Rosa, as well as their New Windsor operation. João Alameida from Almanac Brewing. João has been there 7 years, working as the production manager, overseeing brewing and cellar operations. And last, Mark Fischer from Firestone Walker, who's the director of brewing operations there at Firestone. Quickly, before I turn it over to Vinnie, one of the things I'm passionate about with CO2 is obviously plants need CO2 to grow. CO2 is in beer, and quite frankly, Earth would be one big cold rock if we didn't have CO2. CO2 gets a lot of bad press, so let's celebrate CO2 and all the good things it does. Happens to just also extract hops and all the good flavors and resins that we enjoy in beer. So CO2 to me is a wonderful thing. Like I said, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, but also buying it's not the funnest part, but recovering it or capturing it is. So with that, I'll talk just briefly about our extract systems. We do recover 97 to 99%, basically in process. If you weren't doing that, you wouldn't be able to afford to run it. But we do vent CO2 when we take an extractor offline. And in 2019, we put in a CO2 recovery system. We're capturing about 2,000 tons a year. So that's greatly reduced our carbon footprint. We've added 2 more extraction plants. So we're now in the process of adding another CO2 recovery system. Those plants are even a little more efficient, more on that 98 to 99% side. But what we've done can also be done in a brewery, and they touched on it in the last presentation as well. I call it the double win. If we can not only reduce our carbon footprint and improve sustainability, but if we can also make big gains on the financial side, it's kind of a no-win. So that's where it's pretty easy to go to our board of directors and say, hey, here's a new project that we want to do, and invest the capital and do the engineering to design these systems. And the picture on the right, you can see our first CO2 recovery system we put in. And at the bottom there is our building expansion that we've done to put in our new CO2 recovery system that should be coming online in October. So, Vinnie, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, cool. Thanks, Carl. Thanks to Yakima Chief and Levi for putting this on. This is really cool. Sure, this will be not just, it'll be one of many sustainability summits that YCH puts on. I also just want to say thanks to Yakima Chief Hops and Yakima Chief Ranches for being such an amazing hop partner to Russian River and many of us on the call, and for us, not just for years, but for decades. So it's been an amazing partnership. I've known Carl for probably almost that whole time, which is really cool that they have this amazing group of people that have been there forever. So next slide, please. So, it was great seeing Ashley's Sierra Nevada presentation. For Natalie and I, Sierra Nevada has always been kind of our North Star for a lot of things at Russian River, but sustainability being one. And I'm sure for many, you look at a presentation like that and it's like, oh my God, how do I even get started with that stuff? But I think back to having that same mindset years ago, and now somehow we do have a lot of these great sustainability initiatives that we've implemented just little at a time. And, it didn't happen overnight at Sierra Nevada, and it won't happen overnight for any of us. And it's just whatever you can do is better than what you can't do. So we have a lot of water savings and reuse initiatives at Russian River, but CO2 recovery is our latest sustainability initiative. It's super exciting because, like water is a huge ingredient in beer, but CO2 is the 5th ingredient in beer. And I think we often forget that. So it's just good to keep that in mind. In a little bit, Mark Fischer from Firestone is going to go over a little bit more of a detailed overview of how CO2 recovery works. Our systems work pretty similarly, but at a very high level at Russian River, we capture the CO2 from our beer fermentations. We clean it and remove any of the organic compounds that are in the off gas from the beer fermentations. And then it gets recompressed and put back into our bulk CO2 tank where we can then reuse it. And it actually isn't near as complicated as you think it would be. So it's a pretty cool process. And we've got a system from Dahlem, and it kind of has this click, 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 click when it's running. And I walk by the utility room and hear that thing, and I just think like that's sustainability happening every time I hear it. So a couple of high-level takeaways when we went into this. First was we wanted to be 100% CO2 independent, and that's not necessarily achievable by all breweries because if you're more can focused, then cans use more CO2 in packaging than bottles do, and we are more bottle focused. But needless to say, we are 100% independent, CO2 independent now, which is really cool. CO2 quality, we knew our CO2 quality would go up, and it has, both from a purity standpoint and from a flavor standpoint. We thought it would be a good ROI, and it's turned out to be a pretty decent ROI for us at Russian River. That's a 4-year ROI, and keep in mind, we did it 100% in stainless steel, all the tubing, piping, in fact, all of the stainless steel we bought used from Ken at Sierra Nevada for all the tubing, and we did all the welding in-house and whatnot. So anyways, I've seen a lot of smaller systems that didn't do it in all stainless, and it can be done with soft tubing and whatnot, and have your CO2 recovery unit right by your fermenters and whatnot. So it can be done on a budget, and you can achieve that sustainability very easily. Some of the things we did leading into the project was we started our search for a CO2 recovery vendor, equipment vendor, quite early. Certainly not necessary, and there's only a handful out there, but it definitely makes it easier as you start to compare everyone's positives and negatives and what might work for you and what might not work for you depending on the vendor. We tracked our CO2 usage for several years, long before we picked a vendor. This isn't completely necessary, but it's certainly helpful because that weekly usage that you track is one of the critical components to sizing your equipment. Secondly is to know what your peak CO2 output is from fermentations. So for us, that's 3 quadruple batches of Pliny, that's 75 barrels a batch, fermenting all at the same time, and our 3 Dahlem units being able to handle that volume. So those are 2 key things that you're going to want to look at ahead of time to be able to right size your equipment. Probably the most important thing you're going to do, though, is you're going to review that bulk CO2 contract that you're on right now. And very specific to that is the termination clause. For us, the termination clause was that we had to terminate between 18 months and 12 months, not a day before and not a day after. If we missed it, the contract renewed for 7 years. The other part of this, and this is the most painful part, in fact, when we were reviewing for this presentation the other day, Mark from Sierra Nevada made that comment that, yeah, that was a painful 6 years. For us, it was a painful 7 years. And why we say that is because when your CO2 company sends you the price increase letter and you have the right to go for a competitive bid, you can't go for a competitive bid, because if they match it or you go with a new vendor, you're going to automatically start your CO2 contract again, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So we painfully looked at those letters and didn't do anything for 7 years, but the reward was we signed the termination, we moved on, we have CO2 recovery equipment now, and we're 100% CO2 independent. If you've heard me speak about CO2 recovery before, I have my now, I think, famous line is that if HBO brings back the modern day Sopranos, Tony Soprano is going to be in the CO2 business and not in the trash business, because it is a crooked industry, and that pain that Carl was talking about is very much felt by brewers around the country. We did create a CO2 recovery logo, which is on the screen now, and we have it on our labels, our cans, marketing material. We even have it on a t-shirt, which I wore today, that our staff wears around. So it's something that drives communication with our guests and whatnot, and it's something our team can be really proud of. And then finally, we're about 11 months in. So July 23rd was when we fired up our CO2 recovery equipment at Russian River, and we've collected and cleaned a little over 500,000 pounds of CO2. In fact, we have so much CO2 that we've actually sold CO2 once to another brewery, and then a second time to a broker who sent it off to a company in Kona, Hawaii, who's using it to grow land-based seaweed that end up becoming cattle feed. and then that cattle feed eaten by the cows reduces their methane output. So kind of a cool green use of CO2. So we're always looking for someone to sell CO2 to, because we are making more than we can use, which is pretty neat. So that is my last slide. It's just a picture of our equipment. We've got 3 Dalem senior units. These then send the clean CO2 out to our bulk tank, but we also have the ability to fill dewars. You see that 500-pound dewar to the left, and then those get transferred to our Santa Rosa pub, and our Santa Rosa pub is run 100% on our own CO2 as well. And that's something that a lot of small breweries will do. So they don't have a bulk tank. They can just fill dewars, and they run their brewery off dewars. So, Dalem's smallest customer is a 2,000 barrel brewery. So pretty small operation, and they sell units for even smaller if you want. So, that was a really amazing project that we went through, and just super excited that it's operating and running great. So thank you.
And Vinnie, thanks for that. And thanks for pointing out also that I think part of the discussion is how achievable this is, and going down to a brewery 2,000 barrels is possible. But now we're going to change direction here and talk about direct air capture, which is probably a new technology that not many people have heard about. So, João, educate us.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for having me and including me in this. I'm excited to share this. It is a new technology that we found, so we did look into a little bit of like CO2 reclaiming and units that were out there, and for whatever reason, we just couldn't pull the trigger at that time. Fortunately, we had a local outfit, Air Capture, who was developing this new technology. Rather than recollecting the CO2 off these fermentations and whatnot, the theory was, let's just pull it out of the air, separate it, and see if we can make that work. So they'd been working for a few years on this technology when they approached us. Slide. So yeah, they basically came into the brewery and reached out just to see if we would be willing to talk to them about this new technology. And because it did sound kind of far out and oversimplistic, it did take some meetings, about a year's worth of meetings, to kind of visit their facility in Berkeley. Since it's in Berkeley, it wasn't far, easy to get to. And then we obviously talked about all the challenges that we were facing, that we kind of went over, the monopoly in pricing and the supply force majeure. So it was kind of frustrating. A couple times we had to cease production and, prioritize the tap room, getting the CO2, canceled brews, so on and so forth. Nothing new to probably people out there who are using the commercial CO2. And yeah, so the further the conversation went, the more realistic it seemed, interested in producing a reliable, sustainable CO2, using it kind of as the local CO2, if you wanted, by pulling it out of the air. And then we were just kind of excited, as we were one of their first clients, definitely their first brewery to debut this new technology. So both small outfits, we're doing about, 11,000 to 15,000 barrels a year. So not quite as big as Russian River, Sierra Nevada, that's for sure. So we're both fairly small, but then we're learning together as we work together. So next slide. And the cool thing was, a lot of people, there's that CapEx expense component of any new technology. What was great about air capture is there was no CapEx investment required on our part. They essentially built the system, they operate it, they maintain them. And it's nice that they are in Berkeley, so they're real quick to respond to any and everything. The main thing that we did need, and it's kind of a nice commodity, especially within the Bay Area, is a little bit of space. So other breweries may not have this space. We were fortunate enough to be in an old naval hangar in Alameida. So we had ample space. It seems like the walls are closing in on us every day, but what felt like ample space enough to justify to lean into this project a little bit more. So it does occupy some of our warehouse space, and then just kind of a negative space behind the brewery with the DAC unit, as I'll show you. The important thing for us from a production standpoint was that there was little to no change during the implementation. I think there was only a 4-hour window where we had to do nothing. While we did some passivation and so on and so forth. They integrated it really nicely into our current system. So part of it was understanding how it worked, but also as a fail-safe, can we still rely on that commercial aspect of it? So we do still have the commercial bulk tank. They still do fills, but we are year to date about 22%. We've paid about 22% less because of that, because there's less visits by them as we started to put this in place. We pay only for the CO2 we use from air capture, and they have a nice competitive rate. And, we have a 3-year contract with them, in which case we'll just, revisit it at that time. And again, it's going back to capturing the local air and turning that into the CO2. Next slide on this one. Cool. So this is just a little image on how the unit works. So first up is the direct air capture machine, or the DAC. You can see the image there. So that resides just behind the brewery next to our silos, or grain silos. And essentially how this works is inside the air filter unit on the bottom is about 10 different panels that kind of rotate slowly, and it draws in the air. And there's these bricks inside of it that the CO2 then bonds to those bricks, and then the rest of the gas is just kind of sent off into the atmosphere. And then so as it rotates, there's one unit that the brick aligns with, and then the next slide, or the next button, the boiler on the bottom left, the steam will then release the bond from the CO2, and then that will allow the pure-ish CO2 to go through into our container, which is the next button. And then so that's the container that lives within our warehouse in the back. It's a full-size unit. Inside is where all the magic happens. I don't pretend to know everything that goes on in there. So if there are some technical follow-up questions, you can always email me. So essentially the CO2 is coming along. Let me pull up my side. And then it is liquefied through liquefaction. So it's essentially a cold distillation. The water is separated out prior to that, and then the CO2 is then liquefied and held into the tanks that you see there for storage and vaporization. So the way that we built this was, when the tanks have enough volume and enough pressure, these are the default CO2 source that we have. If the pressure ever becomes too low or utilization is too high, then it'll automatically change back to our commercial system. So from there, the liquid CO2, when it is called for, then runs through a heat X, which then turns it back into a gas and feeds it back into our system. To the next slide, which basically just puts it back into our system and our cellar. So we kind of the CO2 then can just be used as standard CO2. So overall, we debuted it in March after about 3 months of implementation. At first, it was supplying about 20% of our used CO2 in the brewery. As of last month, it was about 55 to 60%. And the goal is by the end of next year to hit 100% utilization. And then at that point, then we can revisit looking at getting rid of commercial altogether is the hope. But obviously, like Vinnie said, we'd have to go through the ins and outs of the contracts and what that means. So a few things that we learned, just kind of a conclusion, is just the supply reliability was just as important as the sustainability. Nobody wants to cancel brews, have any downtime, anything like that. The installation, while it was a year of talking and the equipment itself looked a bit daunting, it was a smooth process that many engineers just kind of came through, and they have access to the building and such, just so they can maintain it 24 hours a day. And then it's just kind of been a nice peace of mind, just knowing that we don't have to rely on these acts of God and the priority that is the CO2 shortage. And we recently just got the price increase letter again, so we're in a fixed contract with air capture. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. The CO2 quality has been great, measured by third-party labs, and super stoked to work with them. It was kind of a very fortuitous visit, and we're happy to share this technology and learn with them as we grow and share it with you guys.
Thanks, João. I don't think you emphasize enough that you're the first brewery in the country, if not the world, that has a direct air capture system. So I think that's pretty darn cool. And hopefully we have a little bit of time to talk about that more later. Next up, Mark's going to get into a little more detail on what CO2 recovery looks like, because every brewery is producing CO2 and most are buying it. So why not recover it? So Mark, let's dig into it a little more.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Carl, for having me on here. And hello, everybody. Stick with us for a little bit longer. I know it's been a long meeting, but I got some cool pictures and some terrible diagrams to show you, so bear with me. So this is really cool to see and talk to Vinnie yesterday and João, and see how this has been implemented on all kinds of breweries of scale. If you rewind the clock to maybe a decade ago, it seemed like CO2 recovery really only penciled out when you got closer to this like 500,000 barrel range. And that's the sort of classic standard system that I'll show you here today. We ended up going with Pentair Halfmans. They're one of the bigger providers. They manufacture out of Venlo, Netherlands. So our unit does about 500 kilograms per hour of CO2 production. The compressors really only hit that when we're in peak fermentation cycle during the week. And then they sort of taper off depending on the brewing schedule and when we're actually in high Kreuzen. But currently we're averaging about 225,000 pounds of CO2 recaptured a month, which right now is offsetting about 75% of our total CO2 usage. So it's taken a good dent out of it. Compare us to Russian River, where they've got a lot of 16 Plato Pliny coming off the line and more in bottles. We've got a bunch of like 12 and a half Plato 805 going into cans. So that's the big difference there, where we're at 75%, while, Vinnie and Natalie have excess. So here's a quick just overview. It's really hard to get one photo of our whole system. We sort of custom designed to a new building. So I just did a snapshot of a 3D drawing to try to get it all on one page here for you. But it really starts with collection in the cellar, and then all the CO2 and very low pressure, 1.5 PSI feeds into this gas balloon. So ours is a 50 cubic meter balloon that inflates and deflates, and then the compressors are going to stage up and stage down depending on that balloon level. But before that CO2 goes into the compressor, first we're going to go into this gas washer. So the CO2 enters the low side of the gas washer. There's water raining down on all these stainless steel plates, and what we're trying to do is clean up or scrub out some of the beer aerosols that might be in the CO2 before that gets into the system, because we don't want to gum it up. So after the gas washer, we go into a dual phase compressor. So that's just taking that 1.5 psi CO2 and pressurizing. That creates a lot of heat. We cool down after each stage of that to drop out any kind of moisture before we send the gas over to a filter dryer. So the two columns on the far left labeled filter dryer are packed full of activated carbon. And then there's also an aluminum silicate sorbide up on the top that will remove any excess moisture, which is critical to get really pure CO2. So we remove the moisture, any odors, and then that CO2 is sent over to the reboiler and chilling system. So the reboiler drum underneath the mezzanine is basically a half to 3/4 full of liquid CO2. And I think of this as kind of reverse distillation. There's a heating coil in that drum where we're warming up that liquid CO2 and forcing it into a gas phase. And then there's a tall column with a big chilling unit on top that recondenses the CO2 and makes it fall back down. But, the opposite of distillation, in distillation, you're going for the whiskey or ethanol coming off the top. We're trying to drive oxygen and impurities off the top, and we're collecting that condensate in the bottom at the bottom of the reboiler. So there's a small pump at the bottom of the reboiler that sends the liquid CO2. We put in another 100,000 pound CO2 storage tank where we're storing our liquid. And then one kind of neat thing about this new system, for a decade, we've been walking by our air gas contracted CO2 storage tank and ambient evaporators, and you just see all that ice collecting on the side of those aluminum fins on the evaporator. And so we decided to put in a shell and tube heat exchanger instead. And all of that expansion cooling generated from, depressurizing the liquid CO2 into a gaseous form, we're getting that cooling and storing it in our glycol tank. So we have a little pump off of our glycol tank. You can see on the far left side of the page that circulates glycol. It actually it's weird to think about because the glycol is just below freezing, but it's actually warming up the liquid CO2 into gas. And then we're utilizing that colder glycol to chill all of our fermenters. So that's this page. So a quick overview of what we did in our cellar to be able to collect all the CO2 off of the headspace. We were fortunate enough to already have a pretty massive pipe fence infrastructure in place for at least 90% of our fermentation volume. So you're looking at a Hontman designed pipe fence, and there's 2 valves that come out of the middle of the pipe fence that go all the way up to the headspace of the tank. So the valve on the right right now is swing linked into our foam trap, and that was sort of the original design. So we're venting off the top of the tank during Croisen. If any liquid comes over, it goes over into this foam trap. And then the valve on the left now, we swing into a new CO2 recovery line, and we automate those. So when we're filling the tank with wort, kind of pre-fermentation, we allow all of that sort of oxygen, ambient air, CO2 mixture to vent out of the tank on the right, out of the valve on the right. So that goes to our other foam trap. And then we just did a lot of trial and error, and we found out that based on the number of turns and how much yeast we pitch and what yeast type, we have a general feeling for what is an appropriate time frame where we would switch over from, you know, venting to atmosphere to collecting CO2, because you do want about 96% CO2 going to your recovery system for it to work effectively. So for us, a lot of it, if it's an 805, about an hour after we actually fill the vessel, which granted this is 5 turns at 2.5 hours to 3 hours per turn, about an hour after it's full, we're already switching over to CO2 recovery. And one of these 1,500 barrel fermenters, like you're looking at the bottom of, might generate about 20,000 pounds of CO2 for us over the course of a few days. So we added that CO2 recovery line, and then all of those lines feed into this little foam trap that you're seeing in the middle of this photo. So I kind of pointed out the CO2 line from fermenters. So that's airlocked into place. And then there's these 2 vent lines coming off the top of that. We do have the oxygen sensors in place on that line. So if we see high levels of oxygen, there's a couple of valves that will switch over and will automatically vent to atmosphere. And then within the general liquid processing program, we'll say, hey, like, what's the last tank that started venting over here? We've got an issue. And then we'll switch that back over to regular exhaust, try it again. But our goal is just to kind of mitigate upstream oxygen going to the system. And then in the background, you can see the gas balloon, the yellow balloon there, the gas washer. And I pointed out that we installed 2 CO2 recovery pipes from all the cellars so that we can CIP and sanitize that entire network from the cellar all the way to our system if and when needed. You know, and like Vinnie was saying, you know, this doesn't have to be all routed in stainless steel. You can achieve a lot of this with hoses, you know, closer proximity stuff. But this is just a glance at our system. I think I've got one more photo. Yeah, just a quick photo of our reboiler, our compressor, and our filter set in that room. And then not shown in this picture, you're seeing the underside of a mezzanine, but we have a chilling unit, a condenser, and then the whole motor control cabinet upstairs above that. That's the overview.
All right, thanks, Mark. And as Mark and Vinnie both pointed out, you don't have to be the size of Russian River or Firestone Walker to be able to do this these days. There's as craft has grown, so is the CO2 recovery industry. And as the 4 of us were talking the other day preparing for this meeting, one of the things that excited me is, like in Firestone Walker's position in Yakima Chiefs, we'll probably never be able to get to where we're 100% off the grid on CO2. And with the technology that Almanac has, we could probably subsidize that with something like DAC. We've also looked into biodigestion, fuel cells, collecting CO2 off of boiler stacks, but the DAC one is pretty clean and plug and play. So I'm really excited to see how things progress at Almanac. And if you guys can also get to 100% meeting your CO2 needs, that's where we would like to end up. And I think a lot of brewers would probably share Same thought, and we'll all have our email addresses on, so you can reach out to any of us for questions on that. And we're pretty much at time. Maybe just one quick comment from each of the three of you before we call it quits.
Yeah, I'll just say that, I mean, it's pretty much what's been reiterated already, but you don't have to be a really large operation. And there's several companies out there that do this. And do your homework. Look at those contracts. If you're on a bulk contract, that's the most important thing, is to circle on the calendar when that termination date is, because that's going to start this whole process to be able to transfer to CO2 recovery.
Yeah, no, we're just ecstatic to debut this for, the nation as far as direct air capture. I'm still learning a lot more about it as we go along, and as they're optimizing the system. So if anybody does have any questions, we're, like I said, right around the 11 to 15,000 barrels a year. When talking to the lads, they were saying that's probably about the smallest they would want to go. And I know much, much bigger breweries on islands are now investigating this a little further. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I can answer what I can, and then I can also introduce where needed as well.
Yeah, I guess final comment from my side is, in the recent years, we've been looking a lot closer at just plant-wide net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And I think in the CO2 recovery or direct air capture arena, this is a really good place to make some real positive ground, especially since the CO2 generated during fermentation is considered biogenic. So it's not really a scope 1 emission. So all of that you're capturing and reusing just goes to further reduce your greenhouse gas emissions in a really positive way for the company overall. So exciting topic.
Yep, thanks for adding that. So I'll just close and just saying, can you afford not to look into CO2 recovery or capture? So with that, Levi, turn it over to you. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Vinnie, João, Mark, Carl, really appreciate your time, and all of our presenters today. Really, your knowledge, your experiences, sharing that, I think, is what's really going to fire up people to continue to do this, to network, to get excited, and beyond this virtual setting, to connect with one another. I think when the idea of the Sustainability Summit was really born, it's the idea of rallying the troops, getting people together, and creating some long-lasting movement. Before we sign off today, I'd like to throw out another plug for another event. If you are so excited enough to visit Yakima during hop harvest, if you have not done that, please consider doing that. We have our annual Hop and Brew School event coming up September 2nd through the 4th. By listening today, you'll be able to get yourself a 15% registration discount. So using this code here, and please, we hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us today. And like Carl mentioned, we'll be sending out everybody's email information, everybody's slide decks following this meeting today, but truly appreciate your time. We're all in this together. As we leave today, I just want to remind everybody, keep asking questions, keep sharing ideas, and keep finding ways to move this industry that we love forward. So let's do it together. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you so much.